The Future of Money, Governance, and the Law is hosted by the Government Blockchain Association, a worldwide community to connect, communicate, and collaborate. This show is produced by Podtex. To learn more and how to host your own show, go to www.podtex.com. Podtechs. Podtex, your partners in podcasting.
Hi, this is Gerard Daché. I'm the Executive Director of the Government Blockchain Association, and I am honored today to have Jorg Molt with us. Jorg is the founder, the Executive Director, the leader of SatoshiCon. And Jorg, he has been in this space for a long time. He's been in the Bitcoin blockchain space since the very early days. Let him tell his story, but he's traveled all over the world training and educating students on blockchain and cryptocurrencies. He owns a consulting company. We'll get into that a little bit later in terms of what he's doing. But with all that, Jorg, welcome to the Future of Money, Governance, and the Law.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, Gerard.
Tell us a little bit about your story, right? Kind of leading up, and when I ask about the story, talk about some of those events. You and I have talked a lot about sort of where you are philosophically and how you apply blockchain and cryptocurrency. Talk to us about some of those events that led you up to be the person you are, so that when you engaged with this technology, it sort of set the path for you.
Yeah, my story begins at the moment where I become an adoptive son to my parents, and my father was working at a bank. So you can imagine from my very young point, with 6 years old, my father was always talking about money and were preparing me to become a banker. So I had a lot of things to learn in my time about banks and how money is going on. And I was very interested in it. Was in the age of 12 years, my father was saying, "Oh, you would be good fitting here into our German Sparkasse where I'm working, and maybe we have a good job later for you." So with 12 years, I was saying to my father the sentence that I'm believing that his imagine of banking comes to an end one day. So he said to me, "Son, you have to learn much more. I didn't know that you do not know enough about it." So what happens was when I'm when I'm in the age of 8-9 years old, I get my first home computer, this VC20. So when it comes out, my father was buying me one because he was believing in the power of computers. That's the future. So he was very foreseen, and that's when I started with all the things. You think I'm a guy from Germany, and when this VC20 comes to Germany, we hadn't got any instructions in German. So this leads me into the situation that I already started to learn the English language in reading and understanding. But if you have a technical book with a, I would say in my age, it was not so easy to understand. So lucky-wise, the C64 came out, and a lot of people in my surroundings got one. Most older people.
This was around 1985, 87, somewhere around there?
Yeah, 1984, around that 1985, that was the beginning of the C64. So,
right.
And so VC20, and yeah. And lucky-wise, I had elder guys around me which were teaching me in this thing, and they showed me how to hack the games, and I like games, So it was very beginning of computer technology. When you see from the hardware side, we have burned all the EPROMs and all the things, and we do speed tests on the floppy drives, and yeah, it was really learning computer technology from the very beginning of OS and everything in there. So in the mid 90s later on, everyone knows that I'm a good hacker. Yeah. And a friend of mine from times before called me and said, "Hey, Jörg, what do you think computer technology is going in the future?" And I was saying, okay, better graphics, better games, harder to hack. So, and he said, "What do you think about the computer controlled people?" So, and I was saying, I don't know really. It's hard to imagine. And he said, "Okay, have you read George Orwell, for example?" I was saying, I'm a computer guy and not a book reader, So what happens, my parents gave me that book as a gift. However, I had to read it before I get my Amiga computer. So what happens was I finally suddenly realized that this world maybe is more powerful and dangerous for us in the future than hacking games. So I started to do my researches on control systems, how finally things going on. And this guy called me back and said, do you want to create something? We have some codes about file systems which are very secure. And do you want to put hands on, leading us into a situation that we get files we can't crack, even if it's in your computer? So I was saying, okay, let me have a look. And I tried my best. And this was coming out that this group was working for DigiCache, for example. So I was the first guy to hack DigiCache. So that's what you know later on. And my way should be that same, that people called me always in hacks and philosophy about computer coding. So I had a story, I had a lot of people from the cyberpunk area around me. So what happens? They lead me into the code checking what finally came out as Bitcoin. So I know the system from the very, very beginning, from the very early stages when it was not open for the public. So this comes by sudden because was my lifetime story, you know. So I was in the right place at the right time.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. You were hacking the code that eventually became the Bitcoin code. Do you know who Satoshi Nakamoto is?
No. Think about, we had whiteboards. We were working with emails and whiteboards, and everything was there, was putting in the whiteboard. So you do not know who is who from all the nicknames. So I would say if you're in a lucky situation that you can address Nick Szabo, for example, for the white paper of Satoshi Nakamoto, I would say yes, he was a part of that, but not really in that. So a lot of people are part of that. So think about
Right.
people ask me if, for example, Craig Stephen Wright is Satoshi Nakamoto. I can confirm he was in the early stages there after Bitcoin Code has been open for the crowd. He was there in
Right.
mid of September in 2009. And even this is a problem also what I have with Gavin Andresen. Gavin Andresen suddenly appeared and he has a strong knowledge about all that stuff. So he was the very first, I would say, he was the very first chief coder for the updates and everything in Bitcoin. But they haven't been there before, so maybe I would have recognized that on the way they write and talk, you know.
Yeah.
So the group in the former times, which leads me into the situation that I could put a hand on the things I didn't know that it is Bitcoin. They were a little bit different from all of that. So Satoshi Nakamoto itself, he's not that guy who is writing a lot. Think about, he was going for examples. Satoshi Nakamoto was a guy who was talking in pictures, you know. And I didn't find any when it comes to who is Satoshi Nakamoto and people talked about, I didn't find any matches from people talking in pictures like he has done. And this is a
Interesting.
different, yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. Did you ever engage with the person or people that use that handle?
I had a conversation by phone with Hell, who unfortunately died. So if you now say I know Hell, no one can prove, you know. This is,
Oh, wow.
it's funny. This is for me, you know. I know my story, and that's where I belong to. And this is finally. I even didn't believe that Hale was Satoshi Nakamoto. Many people suggest that because a picture, think about, many people believe in the Bible, you know, and the Bible comes in the original from the Hebrews and from some guys before the Hebrews. So they describe a tree, for example, that is a plant with different leaves and something like that, and we imagine a tree from that, you know. And
Right.
Satoshi Nakamoto was going that way, like he was doing pictures in coding. So, for example, he was not coding, or he was not giving piece of codes to check. He was giving you a picture to find something in the picture that leads you into cryptography. So that's why we have,
Fascinating.
for example, that's why the reason is, and many people wonder why in the first rows is the article of the New York Times, you know, why it is hard coded in the Bitcoin code. So
Right.
there's a simple answer around that. I believe that Satoshi Nakamoto has worked for the New York Times.
Well, was it the New York Times or the Times of London?
Times of London and New York Times copied that. I think we had both stories in the New York Times about that pizza thing, and then then it comes out, and yeah, in the Times of London we had also the same article.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. There's so many different directions I'd like to take this right into, what was happening back in 2008. So you're doing hacking, you're working on this code. When does the whole issue of Bitcoin kind of come onto the scene for you in terms of, gosh, this is something that is bigger than just a theoretical conversation?
For me, the whole thing came out and leads me into a philosophy in 2010. In 2010, I had that magic moment that I was thinking something is going on. And something is going on by spreading around the code. A lot of people started to mine suddenly. Roger Ver was coming in the end of 2010. Yeah. And he brought 600,000 people into the network. So that leads into a feeling of spirit. You think about you write a game and no one is taking care about your game, and suddenly everyone runs for that. Yeah. So this was a magic moment where I believed, and I was thinking, now it's the time to give the people the philosophy. But what happens instead was, you have seen when Silicon Valley came in there and all the investors come in there, they want to force it in a different direction. So I started a school project called Satoshi Initiative, which now leads into Satoshi Consulting and Education. And one part of that is our Satoshi School, because I do not want to lose the people into wrong philosophy. So you can trade with Bitcoins, but you can always use it for money if you are in a danger zone. So this philosophy, I was always working to keep on. So, and I realized very fast that the whole scenery when it comes to DLT, the fintech was going into all of that after 2013. Yeah, when Ethereum comes out, I was very keen of that this technology has a huge impact. But if we make only a copy of this of the old financing world, where's the difference? And so I started not to go for the Bitcoin conferences where people are a little bit selfish, I would say, because it's not always gold what you see. And I was going to the fintech conferences where they managed to try to make people believe that the blockchain technology and DLT is the same like that and separated from Bitcoin. And I was asking questions, and I was going more over the way that I show in the beginning videos, how government is tracking people, what we have done to Edward Snowden, and why we need Bitcoin as an alternative system for informations and for money transfer if the system fails. So that leads into the situation that I was 2017 in the mood to hack Ethereum on the stage. Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's such a great story. Before we go into that chapter, so you would really consider yourself a libertarian. What's your perspective on government? Because we're the Government Blockchain Association, right? And so, yeah, go ahead. What's your perspective on government and financial systems? Uh,
I'm a strong believer that anarchism is not the solution for everyone, and I believe that freedom needs some rules. The thing is, who is defining the rules and who is the decision maker at the moment? So I had a conference, for example, in Russia, in Sochi, where I met Putin and guys from the central bank, the Olga, I don't know the last name at the moment. She is the financial minister of Russia. So I had the chance to talk to them, and I had a lot of chances to talk to leaders all over the world. So that's why I'm traveled a lot, because I always think, yes, people have to understand there is some freedom into Bitcoin and they can use it in a way. But I always want to make governments understand this Bitcoin thing is not dangerous to the system as we see it. And if we make rules and we make it in a way that it is going on and working in a very, very good way, we can create a system which is much better than now. But you have to talk to the right persons, and you have to do it in a way that they understand that this is a part of a society change. This is not, I would say, this is not a revolution. This is an
right,
evolution.
right. Let me vehemently agree with you, disagree, and then agree again, right? Because uh, so I believe that I'd like to hear your perspective on this. That the government essentially in the 1970s, right, when we passed the Bank Secrecy Act, we basically deputize the financial systems to be an arm of government, right? And that
Yes.
through that, the government can influence, monitor, and control. And the government has a responsibility, right, to influence, monitor, and control societies, to maintain an orderly society, right? Yet at the same time, protecting freedoms, right? But the problem with influence, monitor, and control is, Lord Acton said that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So this ability to do this, which we need in society, society does need some controls, but unfortunately, the concentration of power creates an environment where then corruption can slip in there, right? But what not so much Bitcoin, because Bitcoin's, we can talk about the pseudo anonymous, or we can talk
Yes.
about that in a few minutes. But especially privacy coins, when people start doing peer-to-peer transactions, or they're engaging with Bitcoin ATMs, or they're starting to use this alternative system, that takes power away from the financial institutions, right? It takes visibility, which then essentially erodes government's ability to influence, monitor, and control. But I believe that's going to happen anyway. So government needs to come up with new mechanisms to be able to still have orderly societies, but they're going to have to do it differently than they've done it the last 100 years. What's your thought perspective on that?
I think we see, for that, I'll give you a good example. In 2016, I had a conference call with some financial districts, and I was predicting the crisis, the economy crisis for 2020, because I was saying we didn't learn from 2008 in the crisis. So we have seen that the mistakes we have done in 2008 has to be continued. And I ask myself, okay, if the banking system goes on the same way, where will it end? And what I unlikely saw was that the governments all over the world just let it happen. All this was for me a conclusion that we must end 12 years later into a system crash as we have now, and no one is asking now where was the government to protect us. And I think this is the main point. The reason is lack of knowledge, lack of education. And I'm probably interested to change this educational thing of governments, because think about history of money was always about who is controlling the money. When I think about the Vicini's and Italy, for example, when they said, who is the government when we control the money? So we had a long fight with all the, I would say, with all the Rockefellers to keep the money out. And then we lead it into central banks. And now we see that the central banks are more powerful than the government. At least you can see in India. The RBI was forbidden everything and was playing government until the highest court was saying RBI is nothing. Okay. So this leads me into the situation that I'm seeking. And that's why I'm working with you, for example, because you've done a really good job in building all these chapters all over the world, that we come in the situation that we come back to a round table and can discuss different point of views from a higher point of knowledge and a higher point of vision, so that the governments now, or the people in the decisions, have more education and a more perspective which they can make their decisions on, than only have a tunnel system which is led by banks who says to the government, this is wrong, this is right, or something like that. So they can make up more their mindset in different ways to think. And if we can start a discussion about that, and that's what you already have done, we are in a fine situation. Then all changes in the world start with a discussion.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But it's going to be, it's going to be interesting, because I hear people in government all the time say, talk to me about blockchain, but don't talk to me about cryptocurrency. When the government's about to drop somewhere between $2 trillion and $6 trillion of new supply into the money supply, which I don't understand how it can do anything but dilute the supply of money, and demand doesn't change. So then, but by comparison, Bitcoin with ultimately 21 million coins, this is going to cause something.
Yeah, this is the wrong point to start this discussion. In my experience, I started with one thing. I was saying, if you can't take away something from the people, like you can't stop the people from exchanging music and movies, so how will you address the people in the next generation not to fraud your system?
Not to fraud your system. Explain.
Because the more you make regulations about that, the more the people can go into the dark. And I'm able to show every government in seconds that you can't track, even with chain analysts, some Bitcoin transaction. It's impossible. Even if they have the data, who has a wallet there and there, I can suddenly disappear from the radar completely. So this is a huge impact. So if we can't change something, we have to arrange our world also, including the people who wants that. Because when you think about money and the biggest concerns about governments is terror financing and everything in there, think about it was not the way how money was transacted in the past. Think about the biggest frauds we had in the banks itself, Danske Bank or German bank. You see all that is more money in there in fraudulence than outside. You think offshore accounts or something like that. So when it comes to the point that you want to prevent in a forensic way that people do wrong, you have always an input and an output. So it is not, no matter if you transact your money via Visa, via transfer money or whatever, it is the reason and to figuring out who's the bad guy and who's working with him. And that was all the times over 100 years, it was the same. And do you think that for example, the music industry lost all its control about the music and how music is going on because of Napster?
No, but I do think that it fundamentally transformed the music industry into a streaming platform. So musicians now have to make their money through performances.
So
They've
and you say
that's
right
definitely
thing.
changed.
Yeah, and that's the key point for me. If they can change and turn into a system which is going for streaming and making the stars big, banks and governments can go the way that they show out, okay, we want to go new ways and we want to include you in these new ways, not fighting you. And I will say more people will then accept the rules because they understand it than you say you have to.
Again, you've taken to me a point where I'm trying to decide between 5 different roads to go down, right? All right, so let me ask you. So I really, when this podcast is over, and when this virus thing is over, I just want to go get a beer somewhere, right? A good German beer. So let's take this from the perspective of where governments are today, right? In fact, this leads us into some research that we're doing. We're doing a research right now on the adoption of cryptocurrency and its potential impact on governments, right? In terms of their ability to do law enforcement, control economies, service debt, all those things. If you're a government, right, and the adoption of cryptocurrency goes up, right, how do you think governments should respond, right? Should they try to regulate it? Should they try to embrace it? What's your perspectives on how governments should respond to continued adoption of peer-to-peer open source cryptocurrencies?
I think when we come to this point, government should go the way that they understand that the society needs more consensus. So when you think about it, how cryptocurrency is working, especially Bitcoin, is a consensus system, which is a proven system of majority of nodes and miner. So if you copy this system, say for a 60-40 voting, not a 51 to 49, this leads into discussions, into a consensus system where huge discussions like the coronavirus, for example, also is discussed by the people itself, because then they can say, okay, we have some virologists and they make some plans and we have 3 different opportunities now to handle this crisis. What do you think? And the people have more acceptance in a democratic way that their voice will be heard. I strongly believe that governments have then a more powerful way to address the people, and the people will more support their governments. Think about, we have only 23% of taxpayers in the US. That's a shame. Yeah. But I think if it is more open, that the people understand and they have the feeling they can create some decisions, maybe in a light way for the beginning or something like that. I truly believe that that leads into a better democratic system, and that the trust coming back to the government. Because I think what we see at the moment, that many people are frustrated and do not trust their governments, no matter if it is Trump or whoever. We had this all these times, and the crisis is giving us a good example how trust can come and go in seconds.
Right. Right. And just look at the issues of data, right? Going, a lot of people are saying that China has not provided accurate, timely data. The World Health Organization, right? And so you've got lots of people who are blaming and accusing one another of China's saying that they're making accusations against the U.S. But if we did have more of a transparent system, so let's talk. So you're looking at how the Bitcoin moves into cryptocurrency that really moves into a new governance models, right? So new governance models. Is that pretty much what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, right. And when you think about the beginning of distributed ledger technology back in the 90s, and it leads into a cryptocurrency called Bitcoin, which is using some parts of that to address people with we can send everything in money, why not digital and for the people. Think about that this is only working in a common base. So think about you're very firm in DLT technology and what it can bring for healthcare, what it can bring for agriculture, and think about the smart cities we're talking about now. So I believe um, it is a way how we go hand in hand in this thing. And I think that at the moment we have a generation of people who should decide what's right or wrong in that, which can't follow up business technology in real understanding. There's a lot of corona is a lot of fear. We had this flus all the years before. Think about the swine flu, think about SARS-1, and always the people were talking us millions of people will die and make panic around. Now Trump stopped the payments for the World Health Organization because he says in other words they are all liars, right? So we have come and seen a lot of things, but we have always seen that if we go for our old world, we will be disappointed in a crisis sooner or later. And I believe strongly that if we bring out the best of distributed ledger technology in our banking system and our control system, and for example, Bitcoin is the receipt system or something like that, we can really be we are on the edge of technology where we can make a mindset change and also we can make a change of how we I would say that we look from a more economical point of making less steps. And I think really that's a thing we have to talk to the people because I believe that, and it's my experience. When I came first and talked to governments, my experience was they were mind open. They always said, "Okay, it's fraudulence of cryptocurrencies." But when I show them out how we can combine the best of both systems, because now we have the best of both systems also in the economy and our fiat money, which is more worse than people maybe want to acknowledge. So that's the cradle, and we have to implement in our decisions every part of the society, the government, the banks, the economy, the society. There are so many people, and that's why I like your work. You channelize that. Yeah, you're like a tube. A lot of people run for your and you have done a very good job on that. And this is why I support all that things, because if we have different point of views and we can see the whole picture instead of only some parts of a picture, I think we can make better decisions.
Right. Well, the Government Blockchain Association, we have about 15,000 members in about 100 cities around the world, and about 50 different working groups. And that's what we're trying to do is help all of these different communities connect, communicate, and collaborate. Right. And it's just fascinating. I want to go back when you were going through your timeline. You were going through the 2013, 14 timeframe. So let's go back to the point of when Ethereum came out and all the ICOs and all of that stuff. You took an interest or perspective. You thought that a lot of people were being taken advantage of. Do you want to walk us through that time period and some of the things that you might have been involved with and your thoughts during that time period?
Yeah, I will give you a key a key point of my life, a cornerstone of my life that changed my way thinking about economy and systems a lot. When I was in the age of 16, I was introduced to Amway, for example. Amway was working in the US very good, but in Germany, people taken advantages out of the multi-level marketing system. So I'm a guy of numbers. I'm counting and I'm accounting everything someone is telling to me. So I realized that this is a system which is which is giving some people in the first row a lot of money, and then the last is hidden very hard. Okay, so and I always told my friends, before you invest in something like that, take a calculator, make sure that all numbers are on the calculator, and then ask yourself if it is right or wrong. So I have seen a lot of things coming, Herbalife, Amway. I was seeing coming out, LR. I was, for example, there was huge networks coming out, and at least a lot of many people lost a lot of money because this is like gaming. If you go for Las Vegas, only play with the money you not worry about to lose. But I was seeing in Germany, for example, a lot of people were there, haven't got a job, and that was their last hope to do, and they were giving their last money, and then they disappointed from the systems. So when it comes to computer technology, I was just waiting for the moment when the first schemes come out because it must so. See, this is for example what I always was going for. We have a lot of regulations in cryptocurrencies and everything, but we haven't got any regulation in this space about how to measure if someone saying I have a blockchain and you can mine something, how he has to prove that before he can make a contract with someone. That's for example, yeah. And I was always saying, okay, this guy is telling you you can share and you can mining shares, and then come the first schemes on. For example, I will say OneCoin. For example, I was fighting OneCoin very hard and strong because in that times the Greeks went bankruptcy, and I was going to the Greek to explain them what Bitcoin is, and the government ordered me and was saying OneCoin is Bitcoin. So I get very angry about that. You can, you can imagine, yeah. And I spent a lot of time to make people believe that finally the project's not working. And what more about is when you do hacking, I'm not the best coder in the world, but I can read code and I'm more about a conceptualist. So when it comes, for example, for some schemes and they presented what they want to do, I had always a concept of questions they have to ask, and they couldn't answer these questions. I was asking myself how many value they have, for example. I was checking the company, how many value is. And this leads into the situation with BitClub Network, for example, in Avalon Live. So I was fighting them from inside out. I was investing there. I will have to do my investigations inside. And then suddenly I was going for the WhatsApp group, for example, and was saying, okay, you are in a scheme. So this leads a lot of people who earned a lot of money with that into the situation that they finally try to figure out how they can stop me. What happens is when it started all over and I was going for conferences, if no one knows you, I was going to say, okay, I'm a Bitcoin co-founder because we put the last tens on the Bitcoin, right? so so the people were very attracted, and I always said to the people, it's not about what I'm saying, what I am. Listen, what I have to say. So that's why the conferences started to hire me, for speaker engagements all over the world. So then the people were going and were saying, oh, look, this guy is fighting us with our scheme. He was a former DJ and a former music maker. How can a music maker become knowledge about mathematics and Bitcoin? So, and then people in the network start to make a shitstorm. A shitstorm is not profound. Someone is telling something. Yeah, my ex-wife was invested that, and then she was saying he never had a computer. She has done a video because she wants to blackmail me with money. Okay, so she did this video, and she was saying, "Yeah, you can do," because I do not rely on that. I think if someone is right or wrong, he has to go his way, and he will survive that all. So what happens then was Andreas Antonopoulos. Andreas Antonopoulos was writing this masterpiece about Bitcoin and Ethereum. But I met him in Cologne in Germany on a meetup. We made a picture and he signed me a book, and I took it for giving advantages for my school. So this was the picture. And then people started to say, Jorg is telling us that Andreas Antonopoulos is the best friend of him. This is like it happens to go through the water. So this is, and then the shitstorm started all over, and then it was finally gone in Europe. Then I was in a Las Vegas conference, and Kenneth Bothak is a very big influencer in the crypto space. He was pointing out, Andreas was saying he's a scheme, and then it was suddenly popping up all over the world. And I have a lot of friends in the space also, and they said, we can't believe what they say. What happens to you, And this is what happens if you cry in the wood, we have in Germany an idiom, yeah. If you cry in the wood, you have to stand the wind coming out. So, and
Yeah.
I was always telling to my friends, they said, yeah, look at school, no one is booking now the school course from the normal people because you fight the schemes and then you fight Andreas Antonopoulos and all those things. And I was saying, yeah, if the storm is over, we will see who is last standing, you know. This
Right.
is very important because I can't stand this fraud and can say, oh, because I now I have a high reputation. Because of my reputation, I'm leaving in silence.
Jorg, I have to tell you something. I had
Yeah.
the opportunity several years ago to deal with some fraud and corruption in China, right? And
Mm.
and as I was dealing with it, it was become the heat was getting much worse, right? And somebody flew from another city to meet me, and he said, Gerard, he said, you know, what you're doing is not good. This is not good for your reputation. And he wasn't telling me that as a friend, right? He was essentially giving me a warning. And so I totally appreciate and respect that sometimes when you see things that are happening, you have to do what's right despite the consequences, right? In my case, it cost me my entire career, right? Um, but at the same time, you know, do you want to be the kind of person that lives in fear, or do you want to have character and integrity? And so, um, yeah, I don't think that you can do anything really good without having people tearing you down or anything like that. But I think that's the price. That's the price you pay for leadership.
That's always, if you look for example at Trump, he has a shitstorm after a shitstorm, and he stand that because if you believe in yourself, you will find people who believing in you. And if you find the right persons, it's about the topics you have to talk, not about the personality at all, you know. And if you
Right.
find people who is listening to the topics and is really understanding who you are, and that's what I see in you, Gerard. I see in you more than a founder of that thing here. You know, this is a lifetime, a life story which you have done in your life, and no one can take away from you. I believe strongly in karma, for example, and I think if you have a good karma, the good karma is coming back to you. Otherwise, the system will lead you out of the door.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, listen. In full disclosure, so you and I don't agree with on every little minor point. I think I agree on all of your big points. I was involved in a multi-level marketing business. I was involved in Amway, and in my experience, it was a very good experience. And one of the things that it taught me was the value of networking. Right. And now I was involved in a really good group that really focused on training people and the way they treated people was just with great dignity and respect. So, in my particular case, and I know a lot of people have had bad cases with MLMs, and there are a lot of MLMs that you know that are fraudulent and corrupt and terrible. I think the core point there, right, as you're describing those different experiences, is there's always people that want to take advantage of other people, that will lie, that will manipulate, that will, promise a get rich quick scheme in order to try to collect their money. And unfortunately, stuff like that happens, I think, in almost every industry. I think the MLM industry is an easy industry for people to take advantage of one another, and a lot of people fall subject to it. Um,
And I want to do it add on. The difference in the people is that, even a multi-level marketing, if no one is coming after, must die some point. And I see that when I'm on a higher position in this network, I can see that my network is starving. From a perspective of ethic, I have to inform my people that we stop selling and move over to another product because this is dying. So a
yeah,
lot of people do not have that ethic, and I believe that you are a good leader. And I met a lot of good leaders all after, which are have a philosophy and do it from a point of heart, you know. But
yeah,
also, I got the greedy people who were saying, "Okay, I see that it is starving. Now let's go and closure our downline. That my loss are not that much, you know."
right. But I do believe that blockchain and cryptocurrency, what it does is it provides transparency. It provides um, rules based. I mean, I really like the whole idea about governance, blockchain and governance. And there's so many things I'd like to cover. We're at about 40 minutes, so I need to be wrapping up soon. So, so do me a favor, tell folks a little bit about what you're doing now. You're doing some consulting and some training. Tell people a little bit about some of the consulting that you're doing, some of the maybe the projects you're working on,
Yes.
stuff like that.
Yes. Education in this space is nothing if you can't realize that. So, for example, we have, I'll give you a good example. We have charity programs which running on DLT technology. So this is working like that we have a tracking book on a DLT, which is tracking the incomes and outputs and where it is used for. So we do it all over the Bitcoin blockchain at the moment, for example, and studies in there. So for me, more important is we have a lot of enterprise systems, and at the moment, it seems that people do not really understand that we can change enterprises into blockchain immediately without touching the accounting system in the first row. So this is what our consulting is doing. We train the people. We have a student program to become a blockchain advisor and blockchain consultant. That means we implement these people into the company, leading them into the change into blockchain systems. And the money point that we do computer accounting via the blockchain and ledger technology, it's the last point in an enterprise system. And many people underestimate how hard the work is if you go for Internet of Things about now. And we go for electronic measurements like the Industry 4.0 is given us. Many people underestimate the change in the technology, how much that is that you can track every handshake. This is a huge impact if you go for a company, even if you have only 50 employees. You will see you have a lot of work over 1-2 months to change the mindset and give them an exam sample. Then you go for a sandbox and you do that all. But it is still there, and people can use the technology, not in a fear that they lose their money or something could happen to the system, you know. And this is what we do in the consulting. We do the educational part, and then we say, okay, let's go into implementation, and then we check the companies and say, okay, which part will we use? It's used to be now to be a test part, and then we go for that. And this is a very good experience for us, even because we had the charity and we can show the people that ledger technology is working in a very fine accounting system also. But everything you have to do on books is blockchain. And yeah, so we can give a good example for that.
What kind of organizations have you worked with, and what sort of outcomes have you had?
Okay, we have a big company in Germany, the German Telecom, and they have a part for their technology parts where they do security technology for governments and everything. It's called DTCon. And the DTCon, that was our largest customer, has now booked the full program to understand blockchain, how they can use it for their security measurements and their security systems. For example, the DTCon is able to kill a drone in the air before it's coming. So they have the first defense system for drones. So you see they're in a very strong point when it comes to confidential transactions. And yeah, this is our best customer for the biggest thing. And then we have some little shops where we showed out how they can, for example, you have a little chain of I would say medicals. You can track the logistic in there. I was working, for example, over my company with Pirelli, for example, tracking their tires and everything for studies. So we had a lot of customers also from different fields. That's why I'm talking about all the fields, healthcare and agriculture and everything. We had done a lot of research with this parts of the society.
Excellent, excellent. And then, how can people get in touch with you if they wanted to find out more about what you're doing, or get some support from you?
Yeah, we have a website called satoshicon.info. And also you can connect to me via LinkedIn. And yeah, and then we can make an appointment. What we're doing is we give you a free session, which costs you nothing, only to figure out what's your company doing and where we can help you. Just that, it's free. And then you can decide if it is interesting for you or not. And yeah, you can go for the website satoshicon.info or contact me via LinkedIn, whatever you prefer.
Okay, and then we'll put all this information in the show notes for this episode as well. Um, Jorg, I'm so glad that we had this opportunity to talk to each other. Every time I talk to you, I learn something more, and I just feel blessed in an incredible way. And I hope that these conversations continue, and that we also see you at the Future of Money, Governance, and Law. Hopefully, we'll do another one at the U.S. Capitol after this after this coronavirus thing subsides.
Yeah,
But
and even if he not firm in all of the topics, but I learned a lot of from your perspective also.
Good. Well, a great relationship is when people both get something out of it. So that's awesome. Well,
Right.
listen, I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast, and why don't you just hang on for just a second, so we'll just do some post-show conversations.
Yes.
So, all right.
Thank you.
We shine the spotlight on our community. Please take a few minutes and listen to one of our global members.
My name is Matthew Charnick. I am working on a cryptocurrency called Frink. Cryptocurrency is about giving the power to the people, and we give everyone an equal share of that power. I love GBA. I always meet interesting people here. There are many experts, many people who are very friendly, very knowledgeable, and I always learn something new from every one of them. And love the structure, love networking.
The Future of Money, Governance, and the Law is brought to you by the Government Blockchain Association, or GBA. The podcast brings together leaders in the public and private sector to discuss how government and industry can work together. We talk about how to enhance the integrity of our institutions and the quality of life for the people they serve.